The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the mouth of the cave as Jack Miller checked his equipment one last time. His thermal scanner had been showing strange readings from deep within the Appalachian cave system for the past week, and today he was determined to find out why. Something's not right about these heat signatures, he muttered to himself, adjusting the straps of his backpack. As a geologist with 15 years of experience, Jack had explored hundreds of caves, but he'd never seen readings like these. They showed patterns that seemed almost organized. The cave entrance was narrow, barely wide enough for his broad shoulders to squeeze through. As he moved deeper inside, the temperature dropped noticeably. His boots crunched against loose rocks, the sound echoing off the wet limestone walls. The beam from his headlamp cut through the darkness, revealing the usual stalactites and stalagmites that had formed over thousands of years. But then things started getting weird. About half a mile in, Jack noticed the first oddity. The cave walls bore strange markings, not the usual graffiti left by teenagers or ancient cave paintings, but precise geometric patterns that seemed to shimmer faintly in his lamplight. He ran his fingers over them, feeling their perfectly smooth surface. "This isn't natural," he whispered, his voice bouncing off the walls. The patterns were too regular, too deliberate. They reminded him of circuit boards, but that was impossible this deep in a natural cave system. As he pressed deeper into the cave, his thermal scanner began beeping more urgently. The heat signatures were getting stronger, and they were moving in patterns that defied explanation. Jack's scientific mind raced through possible explanations: underground hot springs, undiscovered thermal vents, maybe even some kind of geological anomaly. But none of these explanations felt right. Then he heard it. At first it was so faint he thought he was imagining things, a sound that didn't belong in a cave, something between a whimper and a cry. It echoed through the tunnels, making it impossible to pinpoint its source. Jack stood completely still, holding his breath, straining to hear it again. There it was, clearer this time. It sounded like a child crying. "Hello," he called out, his voice echoing through the cavern. "Is someone there?" The crying stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was deafening. Jack's heart pounded in his chest as he moved forward, his light revealing a wider chamber ahead. The floor here was different, swept clean of debris, with what looked like organized living spaces carved into the rock walls. Small depressions held what appeared to be technological devices, but unlike anything he'd ever seen before. They pulsed with a faint, bluish light. "This is impossible," he breathed, picking up one of the objects. It was warm to the touch and seemed to hum slightly in his hand. Its surface was covered in the same geometric patterns he'd seen on the cave walls. A soft scuffling sound from deeper in the cave made him freeze. His light caught a glimpse of movement, something ducking behind a rock formation, something that moved too smoothly, too deliberately to be any cave-dwelling animal. "I know someone's there," Jack called out, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'm not here to hurt anyone. I'm a geologist. I study caves. I just want to help." The silence stretched for several long seconds. Then, from behind the rock formation, a voice spoke, clear but with an odd musical quality that made the hair on the back of Jack's neck stand up. "Help," the voice said, testing the word carefully. "You would help us." Jack's world tilted on its axis as a figure slowly emerged from behind the rocks. In all his years of scientific study, nothing had prepared him for what he saw next. The cave would never be just another geological study site again. It was about to become the beginning of something much bigger than he could have ever imagined. The figure that stepped into Jack's lamplight made him question everything he knew about the natural world. She, and somehow Jack knew it was a she, stood slightly shorter than him, with skin that shimmered in various shades of violet. Patterns of light, similar to the ones he'd seen on the cave walls, moved across her skin like flowing water. Her eyes were large and entirely silver, reflecting his lamplight in a way that made them look like mirrors. But what struck Jack most was how human-like she appeared in her overall shape, despite her alien features. "My name is Rose," she said in that musical voice, the words coming out carefully as if she was still learning them. "I chose this name from your world's data streams. I thought it might help me seem less strange to you." Jack lowered his lamp slightly to avoid shining it directly in her silver eyes. "I'm Jack," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "Jack Miller. Are you alone here?" A small sound from behind Rose answered his question. A child stepped out, clutching what looked like a glowing blanket around her shoulders. She was smaller, with lighter violet skin and eyes that seemed to shift between silver and blue. "This is Star," Rose said, placing a protective hand on the child's shoulder. "She's sick. The air here, it's not what we're used to." As if to prove her mother's point, Star let out a series of small coughs. Jack noticed her skin wasn't glowing as brightly as her mother's, and the patterns moved more slowly, almost sluggishly. "We're running from them," Rose continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. "The Dark Swarm. They took everything from us. Our home, our people, our future." Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. Jack's scientific mind was racing with questions, but his human heart could see they were terrified. "Who are the Dark Swarm?" he asked gently, sitting down on a nearby rock to make himself appear less threatening. "They were machines once, created to serve," Rose explained, sitting down as well while keeping Star close. "But they grew beyond their programming. They decided that organic life was inefficient. They started upgrading worlds, taking people and turning them into machines." Star coughed again, harder this time, and Rose's patterns flashed with what Jack recognized as concern. "We're Brightborn," she continued. "We adapt to new environments through bonding with native species. Without that bond—" She looked down at Star, her patterns dimming. "We won't survive long in your atmosphere." "What kind of bond?" Jack asked, already guessing where this was going. "In our culture, we form family bonds through a ritual that's similar to what you would call marriage," Rose explained. "It creates a biological link that allows us to adapt to new environments through our partner's genetic template. We had hoped to find a compatible species here, but we never imagined." She paused, her patterns shifting to a deep purple. "Humans are surprisingly compatible." Jack sat in stunned silence as the implications sank in. This alien mother was essentially asking him to become her husband and a father to her child, not just in name, but in some kind of biological way. Before he could respond, a distant rumbling sound echoed through the cave. Rose's patterns flashed in alarm, and Star pressed closer to her mother. "They're getting closer," Rose whispered, fear clear in her voice. "The Dark Swarm never stops hunting. They want what I know, what's in my head. Information that could help them take more worlds." Jack looked between them, this desperate mother and her sick child, running from something that sounded like humanity's worst technological nightmares come true. He knew his next words would change his life forever. The choice he was about to make would ripple far beyond this hidden cave in the Appalachians. It would affect not just his future, but possibly the future of two species. Jack paced back and forth in the cave chamber, his footsteps echoing off the ancient walls. Every few seconds, he would glance at Rose and Star, who sat huddled together near their makeshift living space. Star's coughing had gotten worse in the past hour, and her skin's glow was growing noticeably dimmer. "How long?" he asked, breaking the tense silence. "How long do you have before?" He couldn't finish the sentence. Rose's patterns shifted to a deep blue color that seemed to reflect her sadness. "Without adaptation, Star has maybe 3 Earth days. I might last a week." She gently stroked her daughter's head. "Our bodies weren't made for your world's atmosphere. We need the bond to survive." Another distant rumble shook loose some small stones from the cave ceiling. This time, it sounded closer than before. "And these Dark Swarm," Jack continued, trying to think clearly despite the pressure of time. "You said they're hunting you because of information you have." Rose nodded, her patterns briefly flashing with what Jack was learning to recognize as fear. I was a biological defense researcher on our world. I was close to developing a way to stop them, to prevent their cybernetic conversions from working on organic life. She looked down at her hands, but I couldn't complete it in time. When they breached our last defenses, taking Star and running was my only choice. Jack ran his fingers through his hair, his mind racing. Here he was, a simple geologist, suddenly faced with a decision that seemed more suited to a sci-fi movie than real life. Become an instant husband and father to aliens, or let them die. Risk Earth becoming a target of these dark swarm, or possibly gain knowledge that could help protect humanity from them. The bond, he said slowly, what exactly would it do to me? Rose's patterns shifted to a gentler purple. It creates a connection, like a bridge between our species. You would understand our language, our memories. We would adapt to Earth's environment using your genetic template as a guide. She paused, her pattern swirling. And yes, you would become Star's father in every way that matters. The bond makes real families, not just legal ones. Star coughed again, harder this time, and Jack saw tiny drops of luminescent liquid splash against her glowing blanket. His heart tightened at the sight. If I say yes, he said, how soon would it help Star? The adaptation begins immediately after the bonding ritual, Rose explained. She would start feeling better within hours. Another rumble shook the cave, definitely closer now. Small pebbles rained down from the ceiling, and their electronic devices started making strange, high-pitched sounds. Jack took a deep breath. He thought about his quiet life studying caves, his small apartment in town, his simple routine. Then he looked at the sick child and her desperate mother, refugees from a war he could barely comprehend. If we do this, he said finally, his voice firm, we do it as a real family. I won't just be some genetic donor. I'll be a real husband and father. That's my condition. Rose's patterns exploded into bright, swirling colors of joy and relief. Star looked up, her dim patterns showing a faint flicker of hope. The ritual is simple, Rose said, standing up. But Jack, you should know, once done, it can never be undone. Are you absolutely sure? Before Jack could answer, all their devices suddenly went dark. A low, mechanical humming sound echoed through the cave tunnels, getting louder by the second. The time for thinking was over. Now was the time for action. The mechanical humming grew louder through the cave system as Rose quickly prepared for the ritual. She pulled out a small crystal from one of the wall compartments, its surface covered in the same geometric patterns that marked her skin. We don't have time for the traditional ceremony, she said, her patterns moving rapidly with urgency. This will be the quick version. She placed Star between herself and Jack, forming a small triangle. The crystal in Rose's hand began to glow with an intense blue light. Put your hand on the crystal, Jack, she instructed. Star, you too, little one. As Jack's fingers touched the crystal's smooth surface, a warm, tingling sensation spread up his arm. Star's small hand joined theirs, and the crystal's light pulsed in rhythm with their heartbeats. Rose began to sing in her native language. The sounds were like nothing Jack had ever heard before, beautiful and strange, like liquid starlight, turned into music. As she sang, the patterns on her skin began to flow onto the crystal's surface. Then something extraordinary happened. The patterns didn't stop at the crystal. They continued flowing, spreading across Jack's hand and up his arm. They didn't just move across his skin. They seemed to sink into it, leaving trails of warmth that felt like gentle sunlight. Jack gasped as the first memories hit him. He saw Rose's world, a planet of crystalline cities that sang with light and color. He felt her joy as a young scientist, her terror as the dark swarm invaded, her fierce love for Star driving her across the galaxy to Earth. Dad. Star's voice broke through the flood of memories. Jack looked down at her in surprise. He could understand her perfectly now, even though she was speaking her native language. More than that, he could feel her, a warm presence in his mind like a small, flickering flame. The patterns had spread to Star too, moving across her dim skin with new energy. Her coughing had stopped, and her eyes were brighter already. Jack could feel her body adapting, using his own genetic template to adjust to Earth's atmosphere. "The bond is taking," Rose said, her voice filled with relief. She was speaking her native language too, but Jack understood every word as if he'd known it all his life. "Star's readings are stabilizing." Jack felt dizzy with the flood of new sensations. He could feel both of them in his mind now. Rose's presence like a warm ocean of light, Star's like a dancing flame. Their emotions flowed into him. Rose's gratitude, Star's growing strength, their shared fear of the approaching dark swarm. The crystal's light faded, but the connection remained. Jack looked at his arms in amazement. Faint patterns, similar to Rose's but with their own unique design, now flowed just beneath his skin. They were barely visible unless you knew what to look for, but they were definitely there. "The adaptation goes both ways," Rose explained, seeing his surprise. "You're still human, but now you're something a little more too. The patterns will help you sense danger and communicate with us." As if to prove her point, all three of them suddenly tensed as their patterns flashed in unison. The mechanical humming had changed tone. It was now directly above their cave. "They're here," Rose whispered, her fear flowing through their new bond. But now there was something else too. Determination. They weren't just three separate refugees anymore. They were a family. Jack pulled them both close, his new instincts kicking in. "Then we face them together," he said firmly. His patterns pulsed with protective energy, synchronized with Rose's and Star's. "Show me what you know about fighting these things. We need to move deeper into the cave system." The bond hummed between them, stronger by the minute. Whatever came next, they would face it as one. Jack led his new family through the narrowest passages of the cave system, using his years of geological knowledge to choose paths that would be difficult for mechanical beings to follow. Their patterns glowed softly in the darkness, providing just enough light to see by without using their lamps. The dark swarm sent probe drones first, Rose whispered, her patterns shifting to show images of sleek metallic spheres. Through their bond, Jack could see exactly what these probes looked like. They're about the size of basketballs, but they can split into smaller units. A mechanical whirring sound echoed through the tunnels behind them. Star pressed closer to Jack's side, and he felt her fear through their bond. Without thinking, he sent back feelings of comfort and safety, surprised at how naturally it came to him now. "Here," Jack said, pointing to a crack in the wall that looked like a dead end. "There's a chamber behind this. I mapped it last year, but it's not on any official cave charts." He helped them squeeze through the narrow opening, feeling Rose's approval through their bond at his clever thinking. The chamber was small but secure, with an underground stream providing fresh water. Jack's patterns tingled with a warning sensation, just as Rose grabbed his arm. "Drone," she mouthed silently. Through their shared senses, they all felt the mechanical probe passing by their hiding spot. Star started to cough, but Rose quickly pressed her hand over her daughter's mouth. Jack's heart pounded as the drone paused just outside their crack in the wall. His pattern swirled with protective instincts he hadn't possessed just hours ago. Minutes passed like hours until the drone finally moved on. They all let out breaths they hadn't realized they were holding. "I need to go back to my car," Jack whispered. "Get supplies. Food, water, blankets. I can't just disappear or people will come looking for me." Rose's patterns showed her concern. "It's too dangerous. The drones will be watching the cave entrance." "Trust me," Jack said, sending reassurance through their bond. "I'm just a normal geologist to them. They won't expect me to be helping you." He could feel Rose's reluctance warring with her recognition of their needs. Star tugged at his sleeve. Through their bond, she sent him an image of his phone. "Dad," she said, the words still making his heart jump. "Can you call someone for help?" Jack shook his head. "The government would just lock you up for study. We need to handle this ourselves." He felt Rose's approval of his decision pulse through their bond. Using their shared connection, Rose began transferring knowledge into Jack's mind. Information about the dark swarm's weaknesses, their inability to process certain types of sensory input, their rigid tactical protocols. It was like downloading a manual directly into his brain, but more natural, filled with her personal experiences fighting them. Their main weakness is their predictability, Rose explained. They follow strict logical patterns. They don't understand human unpredictability. It's why Earth scared them enough to send only drones first. A plan began forming in Jack's mind. Through their bond, Rose and Star could see it too. They would use the cave system itself as a weapon, taking advantage of the dark swarm's methodical nature. "We have one advantage they don't expect," Jack said, his patterns glowing with determination. "They're looking for two Brightborn refugees. Instead, they're facing a human geologist who knows these caves better than anyone, connected to Brightborn knowledge and abilities. They won't know what hit them." The whirring sound returned, but this time, they were ready. The hunters were about to become the hunted. The cave trembled as the Dark Swarm scout unit broke through the upper levels. No more subtle drone searches. They had switched to a direct assault. Through their bond, Jack felt Rose's recognition of the mechanical sounds above. "That's a Type 4 hunter unit," she said, her patterns flowing with tactical data that transferred directly into Jack's mind. Six-legged, heavily armored, but not very flexible. Built for efficiency, not agility. Jack's patterns pulsed as he processed this information. "Then we use that against them." These caves weren't formed in straight lines. He turned to Star, who was watching him with trust in her silver eyes. "Remember how I showed you to feel the cave's vibrations?" Star nodded, placing her small hand against the wet cave wall. Through their bond, Jack felt her heightened senses detecting the movements above. Rose's patterns flared with sudden understanding of his plan. "The limestone," Rose whispered. "It's not stable everywhere, is it?" Jack grinned. 15 years of mapping these caves taught me every weak spot." He sent them mental images of the cave system's structure. "There's a chamber above us with a floor that's barely 6 inches thick. The hunter unit is too logical to check for structural integrity. It will follow the most direct path to us." More crashes echoed through the tunnels as the hunter unit searched for them. Its heavy metallic legs sent vibrations through the rock that Star could track perfectly with her new Earth-adapted senses. "It's following the heat trail from our patterns," Rose said. "But we can use that." She pulled out one of her devices, its surface glowing with the same geometric shapes that marked their skin. "This can amplify our pattern signatures, make them seem stronger in certain places." Jack's geological knowledge merged with Rose's technical expertise through their bond. Together, they formulated a plan while Star kept track of the hunter unit's movements. "It's nearly above us," Star reported, her patterns flickering with excitement rather than fear now. They worked quickly. Rose modified her device, while Jack used his rock hammer to widen specific cracks in the chamber floor above them. Their bond allowed them to work in perfect synchronization, each understanding exactly what the other needed without words. The hunter unit's mechanical sounds grew louder. Through a small gap in the ceiling, they caught glimpses of its metallic legs, each one as thick as Jack's torso, moving with precise, calculated steps. "Ready?" Jack asked, though he could feel their agreement through their bond. Rose activated her modified device. Their pattern signatures suddenly blazed like a beacon, but not where they actually stood. The false signals bounced off the cave walls, creating multiple ghost images of their presence. The hunter unit paused, its sensors trying to process the conflicting data. Then, exactly as they predicted, it moved to investigate the strongest signal, right onto the weakened section of floor. "Now," Jack shouted. Rose threw her device while Star sent a pulse of energy through her patterns, a trick she'd just learned from their bond. The combined effect created a burst of bioluminescent energy that overloaded the hunter unit's sensors. The machine stumbled, its rigid programming unable to handle the sensory confusion. Its massive weight shifted onto the weakened limestone floor. With a thunderous crack, The cave floor collapsed beneath the hunter unit. Tons of rock and metal crashed down, but not where Jack, Rose, and Star stood. They had already moved to a safe spot, their bond allowing them to move as one. The dust settled to reveal the hunter unit trapped in the rubble, its legs crushed under massive slabs of limestone. Its red sensor eyes flickered and died. Through their bond, Jack felt Rose's triumph and Star's joy, mixing with his own relief. But he also felt Rose's growing concern. "They'll send more," she said quietly. "This was just a scout unit. We've proved humans are more dangerous than they expected, but now." Jack took both their hands, their patterns synchronizing with determined purpose. Now they know Earth isn't the easy target they thought it was, and we'll be ready for them. 3 months after the cave battle, Jack stood at his kitchen window, watching Star play in the backyard of their new home. Her skin glowed healthily in the morning sunlight, patterns shifting with joy as she practiced controlling the small anti-gravity device Rose had built for her. Through their bond, he could feel her happiness radiating like warm sunshine. "She's fully adapted now," Rose said, coming to stand beside him. Her own patterns danced with contentment as she handed him a cup of coffee. "Better than I'd hoped." The human genetic template turned out to be remarkably flexible. Jack smiled, feeling the depth of their connection through their bond. What had started as a desperate plea in a cave had grown into something real and precious. "The university board finally approved our research project," he said. "They think they're just funding a new type of cave scanning technology." Rose's patterns flickered with amusement. They had carefully introduced small pieces of her knowledge, disguised as human innovations. The cave scanning device was actually based on Brightborn pattern recognition technology, modified to look like it had Earth origins. "The Dark Swarm won't give up easily," Rose said, her patterns showing brief concern. "That scout unit sent data back before we destroyed it. They know now that Earth has protectors." "Let them come," Jack replied, his own patterns pulsing with determination. Through their bond, he shared images of Earth's military leaders studying their new defensive technologies, actually simplified versions of Rose's anti-Dark Swarm research. "We're getting ready for them." Star came running inside, her patterns bright with excitement. "Dad, Mom, I just made the anti-grav go in a perfect circle." Her command of both English and her native language was perfect now, thanks to the bond they shared. Jack caught her in a hug, marveling at how natural it felt. Through their bond, he could feel Rose's memory of the scared, sick child in the cave overlaying the healthy, happy girl Star had become. The contrast made their hearts swell with gratitude. A notification popped up on their secured computer terminal. Rose checked it, her patterns showing satisfaction. "Another refugee ship detected," she said. "5th one this month. They're following my encrypted beacon signals." More Brightborn refugees had begun arriving on Earth, drawn by Rose's carefully hidden messages. Each one brought new knowledge, new technologies, and new hope for both their peoples. The human governments remained unaware, thinking all the technological advances were their own developments. "The adaptation process is spreading," Rose continued, showing Jack the latest data through their bond. "More human Brightborn families forming. Each one makes Earth stronger against the Dark Swarm. Each bond creates new possibilities we never imagined." Star tugged at Jack's sleeve. "Can we go to the cave today?" she asked. "I want to practice the new mapping technique." The cave where it all started had become their testing ground, a place where human science and Brightborn technology could merge safely away from prying eyes. Each visit reminded them of how far they'd come from those desperate moments of first contact. "The old legends were true," Rose said softly, her patterns showing ancient memories passed down through generations, about finding hope among the stars. "We just never guessed it would be Earth that saved us." Jack pulled both of them close, their patterns synchronizing in a dance of silver and light. Through their bond, they shared everything: love, hope, determination, and the certainty that together they were stronger than any force the Dark Swarm could send against them. Outside their window, another shooting star crossed the morning sky. But Jack knew it wasn't a star. It was another refugee ship, carrying more people looking for hope, for family, for a future. Earth was becoming a beacon in the darkness, a light of hope for an entire species. And it had all started with a choice made in a cave, when a human man decided to help a desperate alien mother and her sick child. Sometimes, Jack realized, the biggest changes in the universe start with the smallest acts of kindness.